Welcome back. Today we are working on something pretty special. A gift, actually. A relief sculpture of a willow tree.
Like all projects, I start with the drawing. I knew I wanted a willow tree, but I thought I might incorporate something like the church, or the turnverein where our reception was at. I ultimately decided that it should just be about the willow tree. The 9th wedding anniversary is traditionally about ceramics and willow wood, so it was a natural subject matter. As you can see, lots of drawings are done until I decide on the one that is right.
So relief sculpture is a really great way to create something that's pretty complex, but that doesn't take a lot of space. It's like a pictorial sculpture. Depending on how much clay you have is going to determine the size of it. Relief sculptures, since they are basically kind of like a flat plane, a tile if you will, it could be any size, any shape for that matter. The best thing to do with starting out is try to cut a slab of clay that is a uniform thickness. Now normally I'd say a thumb thickness because that's the appropriate thickness to fire something, but I'm going to suggest to have it maybe about double that thickness because we want to be able to carve into it, and then it's going to get thinner and thinner. We might even add clay to it as well, but those small amounts of clay are not going to make a big difference in the firing process as far as thickness goes. So I am going to start, let's see, I am going to use some of this wire. It's kind of firm, but that is a good thing, okay? If your clay is starting to get a little bit firm, it's better for carving, okay? I'm going to go ahead and cover this. So there it is, a nice slab of clay. It's not very pretty, it's not very even. I'm going to even this out a little bit, and because I have a really thick side here and got a little thin here, and that's not really the idea. So how do we get it more even? A rolling pin. A rolling pin works good. If you have one at home, you can clean it up after. If you have a round dowel of sorts, that would also work. PVC tube or pipe, that works. I don't have anything around here. I'm going to go and find something. Be right back. I'm back. Got a PVC tube because that's what I had. Alright, so this I'm going to start rolling it out. Again, don't get too thin. You're going to carve into it. You're going to add clay to it. You want to, as I said, maybe about double finger. Good enough. Alright, so here we have our oddly shaped slab of clay. And remember these images that I was just working on? Well, I've decided I'm going to go something with a little more motion like this one. Now there's a few ways to go about this. Okay? One is you can look at your piece of clay here and decide, do you want it to have perfect straight edges, or do you actually want it to have kind of a rough edge? Now this is a very organic piece, so I might actually decide to keep this. Now maybe I won't keep it exactly like this. What I might do is you know, compare the picture here, you know, kind of look at it going, well, maybe I don't want that there. All right, maybe I want to even out this. All right, maybe not so much here. All right, the thing you can do is prop this up. Okay, so now here's another decision. Okay, if you want it to be a picture that is the same orientation than what I drew, then there's a few ways you can go about it. One, you can actually just kind of redraw it here, which honestly is probably what I'll do, because that's just kind of the way I do it. Another thing you can do, and this is kind of a cool thing, is since this is done with pencil, graphite, if you lay it on the piece of clay and you actually kind of rub it, I don't know if it picks up, but you can actually see all the pencil marks come through onto the clay, which is actually pretty cool. Okay, now if you want it to be the same orientation, what you can always do is you can trace your drawing on the back of the piece of paper, all right, and then transfer it. But what you need is kind of like a carbon copy. You need some graphite between the paper and the clay, right? But you can actually see the pencil marks coming through pretty easily. It works quite well. Okay? So there's the ways to go about transferring this idea onto here. Okay. Now, this is not a drawing on clay, relief sculpture. Okay? The drawing is a guide, and there's a few examples that I will present later that kind of how to organize that space, but I think for now we'll just kind of take a look at how I go about attacking this.
Yes, that is correct. You do see me drawing on clay, but that's only to organize my space. I'm determining where the foreground is, the middle ground, and of course the background. What you see me doing here at this stage is really deciding what is the background. Now the background I want to appear to be far away, and so I am going to make that the lowest level of my relief sculpture. I'm actually sculpting into the slab of clay, and ultimately you see that the foreground is actually looking like it's being raised. Now, as you can see, I can start to add clay to the portions that I want to pop from the whole sculpture, which is the tree, the main subject, the positive space, the foreground. It should be noted, of course, that you don't see me using slip at this point. The clay is very soft, it's very wet. It doesn't need it in the case that I am very careful about joining all the parts together. So it's like coil construction in that I'm joining the fresh clay to the fresh clay. Of course, as time goes on, the clay will get stiffer and need slip. Here you can see that I'm massing out where the branches will go, where the weeping leaves will go, and I'm just kind of getting an idea of where I want to place things. Now, of course, if I want to attach them correctly, you do see me doing a little bit of scoring and adding a little water. This is still the first day, so the clay is quite fresh, but I want to make sure that they stick on, so I do some scoring and slipping. Before I put it away for the day, I do have a little bit of fun adding some textures, putting in some leaves, kind of developing where that foreground, middle ground, and background is. And then I'm going to cover it up. I'm going to let it set up. See you tomorrow.
Alright, so here we have day 2 of the sculpture relief project. And it's an integral part of a project like this because the clay has had an opportunity to set up and get just a little more firm. It's still cool to the touch, it's still quite wet, but it will not take new clay very well. You need to use a little slip to make sure it sticks. And another thing that it does at this stage is it carves a little bit better. And as you can see with my work yesterday, the clay would kind of ball up and it just wasn't very clean, but that's because it just was a little bit too wet. So now that it's a bit firm, I can do a few things. I can go in and I can refine the edges. I can make them nice and sharp if I want to. Another great thing you can do is, of course I don't have it here, aha, is to take a brush. Now I stole this from my wife's, it's a makeup brush, but this is really nice for cleaning out the little boogers, if you will, out of the clay. Okay? Sometimes, like within some of this texture here, I might want to keep some of that texture, or I want to soften it up. So you can actually take some water using the brush and kind of soften up some of the edges and kind of blend them and make them smooth. And again, the idea is never to make your sculpture smooth. That's always like a common misconception about clay, is that it has to all be smoothed out. That's so not the case. I would argue that it has to all be textured, and that will make a difference. So what you're going to see me do on day 2 here is maybe kind of soften some edges, clean up all the little boogers, sharpen and crisp up some of the sculptural details. And as you can see, it's still sitting on this board. It's still stuck. I want to liberate it off of the board, and even though it's pretty thin, it's pretty thick, I'm sorry, I want to thin it up a bit. So I'm actually going to carve from the back a bit. It's kind of a sort of a hollowing out technique, just because I know, like right down here where it's a little bit thicker, I want to make sure that it's not too thick. Alright, so here we go. So here I am at the school. I'm letting my piece dry out, putting it in the sun. It's going to do a pretty quick drying out process. So here's a kiln. This one is electric. There's a control panel. On the inside, very heavy. These are ceramic tile. These are coils that heat up, and it gets very, very hot in here, about 2,000 degrees for some purposes. And that's about it. That's where your clay pieces can get fired. Now, we do have this big, huge one that is basically a worthless paperweight because it doesn't have enough gas pressure to actually work.
Now the painting process I use is with acrylic paints. It's 3 steps: a base coat, a glazing to darken all the crevices, and a dry brushing where I take a very light green, take most of the paint off of the brush, and swipe it over the high parts, creating that nice verdigris texture.